In the instant he enters, a man crosses a threshold, a moment where persona meets shadow, and love begins only if he dares to stay. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." There is perhaps no moment where this truth becomes more alive than in intimacy. When a man goes inside a woman, something far beyond the physical happens. His body moves, yes, but so does his psyche. Behind every motion lives an ancient dialogue between power and surrender, fear and longing, shadow and soul. For centuries, culture has reduced this moment to a brief act of pleasure, a spark of desire, a release of tension. But Jungian psychology whispers a deeper truth, that in those quiet seconds when bodies merge and the masks fall away, the unconscious steps forward. Beneath his calm, beneath her stillness, 1,000 archetypes awaken. The lover, the child, the warrior. Each carries its own memory, its own fear, its own dream of wholeness. He may look confident, certain, almost unshakable, but inside he stands at a sacred doorway, a space between who he thinks he is and what he truly feels when all defenses are gone. In that sacred crossing, two stories intertwine, the story of a man who wants to be enough, and the story of a woman who wants to be truly seen. This is not the language of biology, nor the language of performance. It is the language of the soul, the place where desire becomes mirror, where pleasure becomes revelation. So let us pause. Let us look beneath the surface and listen to what truly moves in the silence between breaths. Because if we dare to understand this, we begin to see that intimacy is not merely what two bodies share. It is how two souls awaken each other to truth, and that truth is rarely comfortable. It exposes pride and fear, confidence and doubt, love and shadow, all dancing in the same heartbeat. In this exploration, we will travel through the 5 hidden layers of what a man truly feels when he goes inside you. Not the stories told in movies, not the myths of dominance or detachment, but the psychological currents that surge beneath his skin. Through Jung's eyes, we will witness how intimacy becomes a mirror, reflecting back his power, his fragility, his longing for validation, his fear of love, and ultimately, his search for identity through presence. This is not about exposing men, it is about revealing the human soul, the complexity that lives beneath our simplest desires. So take a breath, forget what you've been told about passion, and listen instead to what the unconscious reveals when silence begins to speak. In the instant he enters, he is not just entering her body, he is entering himself. Power and vulnerability. There is a moment, too brief to be measured, yet vast enough to hold a man's entire psyche, when he enters the woman he desires. In that instant, two opposite currents rush through him, power and vulnerability. They move together like lightning and rain. One strikes with intensity, the other softens everything it touches. On one hand, he feels chosen. Her acceptance confirms his existence, as if the universe has whispered, "Yes, you are enough to be welcomed." It touches something ancient inside him, the primal inheritance of the archetypal male, to pursue, to conquer, to plant, to protect. For a heartbeat, he stands as the giver of life, the embodiment of masculine energy, the one who carries fire into the world. But within that same heartbeat, something else trembles. The moment he is inside, he is also exposed. His armor, his mask, his practiced composure, they begin to melt. What if she sees more than he wants to reveal? What if she senses the small tremor of uncertainty he hides? What if, behind his strength, she feels the quiet question echoing inside him, "Am I enough?" He may never say these words aloud, but his body carries them like a prayer. For most men, this paradox becomes their silent battlefield. They are taught to move through the world with confidence, to show control, not doubt, to offer certainty, not confusion. Yet, within intimacy, control dissolves. There is no pretending when two souls are skin to skin. And here, the archetypes awaken. The lover rises first, proud, alive, radiant with desire. He celebrates being wanted, feeling her breath as proof of his vitality. The child follows quietly, longing to be held, to be told without words that he is safe. He hides behind playfulness, behind humor, but what he really seeks is comfort. Then comes the warrior, standing guard over his fragile inner world, determined not to let uncertainty show. He grips control tightly, as if dominance could silence the whispers of doubt, but the psyche does not obey armor. It reveals itself anyway, in the way his hands tremble slightly, in the pause before his breath returns, in the moment he looks into her eyes and quickly looks away. To many women, this contradiction can be confusing. They feel his confidence, the physical drive, the masculine force, but then, almost suddenly, he withdraws. His voice softens, his gaze drifts. He seems distant, unreachable. What they don't see is that, inside, he's walking a tightrope between pride and fear. Every touch, every sigh, every heartbeat is a silent dialogue between two halves of his being. For some men, the fear wins. They retreat behind bravado. They talk louder, act tougher, turn intimacy into performance. It isn't arrogance, it's armor. A desperate attempt to drown out the inner voice whispering, "What if I disappointed her?" For others, the fear opens a door. They soften, and they stay. Their eyes linger longer, their breath synchronizes with hers. They risk being seen fully, and that risk becomes their liberation, because in that moment, when he stops performing and starts feeling, he touches something sacred, the truth that real power is not domination, but presence. Jung would say, "What we resist persists." If a man resists his own fragility, it will haunt him through projection. He will accuse, blame, or withdraw, believing his partner judges him, when it is his own shadow he fears. But if he accepts both his strength and his softness, he steps closer to individuation, the process of becoming whole. For the woman, understanding this paradox is like holding the key to a secret room. When she sees beyond his mask, when she recognizes the trembling behind his touch, something miraculous happens. He no longer needs to hide. He no longer fears being small. Because someone has seen him, not as a symbol of masculinity, but as a human soul navigating his own contradictions. When a woman honors both his force and his fear, she doesn't diminish him, she frees him. And in that freedom, love begins to breathe. But if she mocks his fragility or demands constant proof of his strength, he collapses under the weight of expectation. His shadow retreats, and the distance between them grows silently, like a wall built out of invisible shame. So here lies the first truth of intimacy. A man feels powerful because he is chosen, but fragile because he fears falling short. To love him is not to protect his ego, nor to carry his wounds. It is simply to see him entirely. When she sees both the warrior and the child, both the lover and the shadow, she becomes the mirror of his wholeness, and in that reflection, he can finally rest. Power without tenderness becomes control. Vulnerability without safety becomes collapse. But together, they form the heartbeat of love. Validation, the hunger to feel enough. He feels her warmth, her breath, the softness of her skin, and somewhere deep inside, a question rises that he does not dare to speak. Am I enough? It's a quiet, ancient question. It hides behind every confident touch, every carefully timed breath, every movement that looks effortless but is really a prayer. For many men, the act of entering a woman is unconsciously experienced as proof of worth. It is as if his soul whispers, "If she accepts me, if she opens to me, then I exist, then I matter." This longing is not vanity, it is inheritance. For generations, men have been told that their value lies in what they can do, not in who they are. So when he is inside her, for one fleeting moment, he feels like the world is finally saying, yes. But this yes is fragile, because the moment it becomes a measurement, it begins to fade. If worth is proven only by her response, by her breath, her gaze, her sound, then he is forever bound to keep earning it. Jung would call this the shadow of inadequacy, the hidden wound that drives men to perform, to conquer, to seek validation through others rather than meeting themselves within. And in that space, intimacy becomes more than desire, it becomes evidence, her body, her reaction, her pleasure. They all become silent indicators of whether he has succeeded or failed. He doesn't consciously choose this. It's an instinct woven through centuries of conditioning. A deep confusion between love and approval. When she gasps, he feels victorious. When she turns quiet, his mind spirals into self-doubt. He replays moments, analyzing, wondering if he was too slow, too fast, too detached, if she wanted more or less, or someone else entirely. He tells himself he's strong, but inside, he's measuring every sigh like a soldier checking for signs of defeat. This is not weakness, it's the unseen war between persona and shadow. The persona wants to be admired, the shadow trembles with the fear of being seen and found lacking. And in that invisible war, the woman becomes both witness and mirror. When she looks at him with softness, when her eyes say, "You're here, and that's enough," something unclenches in his chest. The armor loosens, presence returns. But when her gaze drifts or her energy feels distant, he feels the shadow stir. The inner voice whispers, "You failed. You weren't memorable. You weren't enough." And in that moment, he may pull away, not because he doesn't care, but because caring now feels unbearable. Carl Jung once wrote that what remains unconscious rules us as fate. Until a man faces this hidden hunger, he will keep chasing validation in every encounter, never realizing he's searching for himself. He may move from woman to woman, relationship to relationship, not for adventure, but for confirmation. Each moment of connection briefly fills the void, then emptiness returns, demanding another fix. This is the tragedy of the unexamined shadow, to mistake being desired for being whole. Yet the Jungian path offers another way, a doorway through awareness. When a man begins to notice the subtle pull for validation, to see it not as shame, but as signal, he can begin to breathe again. He can stop chasing proof and start cultivating presence. And when that happens, intimacy transforms. It becomes not a stage for performance, but a sanctuary for truth. For women, this awareness is freedom. You are not responsible for carrying his self-worth. You are not the mirror that must constantly reflect his value. Your only task is authenticity, to respond from truth, not obligation. If his hunger for validation is unconscious, it can feel like pressure, as if your pleasure, your sounds, your expressions must constantly reassure him. But if he is awake to it, the same moment becomes sacred, because both know what is happening beneath the surface. He is not taking validation from you, he is witnessing himself through you, and that is where healing begins. True intimacy, Jung would remind us, is not about performance or proof. It is about seeing the shadow and still choosing presence. When a man accepts his uncertainty, when he no longer runs from the small voice saying, "I hope I'm enough," something powerful happens. He no longer needs every encounter to declare his worth. He can simply be there. And when he rests in that presence, his desire becomes pure again. Not a hunger for approval, but a movement toward union, because love does not need proof, it needs awareness. And awareness transforms even the most fragile need into a bridge toward wholeness. Validation is natural, but when it becomes the only goal, it enslaves both lovers. Let intimacy be not the test of your worth, but the mirror through which you remember your soul. The dissolving walls, bonding beyond biology. In the ancient stories of men, he was the wanderer, the one who left to conquer and returned to the same fire, the same arms, the same familiar scent. He hunted, he fought, he built, but always he returned. Even the myths knew, for every man who leaves, there is something that pulls him back, something stronger than pride, deeper than logic, older than time. Modern science gives it names: oxytocin, dopamine, neural bonding. Yet Jung would say, this chemical alchemy only mirrors what the soul has always known, that when two bodies meet, it is not merely flesh against flesh, but psyche touching psyche. The walls of the ego begin to dissolve, the illusion of separateness weakens. For a moment, he is no longer a man standing apart. He is part of something vast, mysterious, and whole. He may tell himself it's casual, he may swear that it means nothing, but his body remembers differently. His nervous system records her scent, her rhythm, her sound. They become etched into the quiet corners of his being. Long after he walks away, she lives there, not as memory, but as imprint. Jung would take this further. He would say that what a man meets in a woman's body is not only her, but the anima, the feminine part of his own soul, the eternal mirror that calls him toward integration. When he enters her, he also enters himself. When he touches her, he touches the unspoken longing to become whole. This is why intimacy feels both divine and dangerous, because it awakens what logic cannot control. The moment she opens to him, his unconscious opens as well. It does not ask for permission. It begins to write her into his myth. He may think it's just chemistry, but Jung would say it's archetypal memory, the psyche remembering its origin, its yearning for the lost other half. And so, he returns, sometimes again and again. Not for conquest, but for completion. He may not understand why. He may tell himself he's being foolish, irrational, weak, but the truth is simpler. His soul has recognized something that his mind cannot name. Even if he hides behind logic, his dreams betray him. She appears there, not always as herself, but as symbols: water, moonlight, music, a whisper in the dark, because the anima never forgets the one who awakened her. Yet this bond carries danger. If he mistakes merging for ownership, he will cling. If he denies it altogether, he will scatter himself across countless encounters, searching for the same echo in 1,000 different faces. Jung warned, until we make the symbolic conscious, we are possessed by it. So long as he refuses to see that the woman before him is the mirror of his inner feminine, he will keep chasing her shadow in others. For many women, this explains the mystery of the man who cannot stay away. He returns not because of strategy, not because of lust alone, but because something in him has been marked. Her energy, the softness, the depth, the silence, has stirred his anima, and once awakened, she does not sleep easily. His biology binds him, his unconscious binds him deeper. He may forget her name, but his body remembers her presence. His soul remembers the merging. It is both beautiful and perilous, because in her he saw not only pleasure, he saw home. And now, without her, home feels far away. To her, it might look like obsession. To him, it feels like gravity. Jung called this the archetype of union, a sacred pull toward integration. But without awareness, it becomes entanglement. When a man clings to the woman as if she is the source of his wholeness, he forgets the truth. She only mirrors what already lives within him. And when she knows this, when she understands that his attachment is as much unconscious as emotional, she can step back with compassion, not confusion. She does not need to fix him. She does not need to become his cure, because healing was never her role. Her awareness itself is enough. When she stands in her own presence, calm, clear, grounded, she reflects to him the very stillness he seeks. And if he is ready, he will see her not as possession, but as portal, not as his missing half, but as the mirror through which he meets the feminine within. This is the essence of the third merging, not of bodies, but of energies, masculine and feminine, light and shadow, becoming one breath. It is not ownership, it is awakening. So, when he returns again and again, know that it is not always choice, it is remembrance. His soul remembers where it once tasted its reflection. And sometimes, the hardest truth to accept is that love's intensity is not proof of destiny, but proof of awakening. He may believe he is entering her, but what he truly enters is the part of himself that longs to return home. Fear and love, the inner war. There is a man who once said, "I thought it was nothing serious, but when she opened to me, something broke open inside." He didn't expect it. The wave that came after the body had calmed, the strange trembling that had nothing to do with desire. He was afraid, and yet, he cared for her more than he ever intended. This is the paradox no one teaches men about. Intimacy awakens not only pleasure, but a collision between fear and love. On the surface, he may look certain, a man in control, the one who decides when to stay and when to go, but inside, another reality unfolds. Because once the body opens, so does the unconscious, and the unconscious does not obey logic. It speaks through emotion, through ache, through the unbearable tenderness that follows the act. He told himself it was just physical, that he could walk away untouched, but his shadow had other plans. The moment he entered her, he entered the chambers of his own psyche. And what he found there was not only lust, but love, quiet, vast, and terrifying. Fear rises first, fear of failure, that he didn't satisfy her, that he wasn't enough, fear of being forgotten, that she might walk away unchanged while he remains haunted, fear of comparison, the ancient whisper, what if she remembers someone else instead? These fears belong to the shadow, the hidden child inside the man, the one who still trembles under the weight of inadequacy and shame. Intimacy shines a ruthless light into that chamber. He cannot hide there, he cannot joke his way out. The body knows, the soul knows, and just as fear reaches its peak, love slips in, not the loud, dramatic love of romance, but the silent kind that feels like surrender. It is the awakening of the anima, the inner feminine that lives within every man. She rises when he allows himself to feel, when he no longer runs from connection. The woman before him ceases to be just a lover. She becomes the mirror, the reflection of his own soul, the reminder that tenderness is not weakness and that vulnerability is not defeat. And this is where the battle begins. The rational mind resists. This isn't love. Don't fall. Keep control. But the unconscious whispers, this is what you've been longing for. He stands between two worlds, the world that demands pride and the one that calls for surrender. He wants to flee, and yet he wants to stay. He wants to prove his strength, and yet he wants to be held. It is not hypocrisy. It is the ancient war of the psyche, the conflict between shadow and anima, between the fear of being exposed and the longing to be seen. If fear wins, he hardens. He turns intimacy into performance, hiding behind control, convincing himself he doesn't care. But deep inside, love lingers, waiting for courage. If love wins, he begins to integrate. He lets go of the mask. He allows both fear and affection to exist in the same breath. And in that acceptance, something profound happens. He becomes whole. Because love without fear is fantasy, and fear without love is emptiness. Only when they meet does the human heart become real. For women, this explains the contradiction so many feel. One day he is close, present, tender, open. The next day, distant, unreachable, cold. But this is not rejection, it is overwhelm. He has touched something in himself that he is not ready to face. He is not pulling away from you, he is retreating from his own awakening. And that is the tragedy of unconscious love, to feel the truth and run from it at the same time. But when he dares to stay, when he breathes through the fear instead of fighting it, love transforms from danger into teacher. Jung would call this individuation, the alchemy of opposites. Fear does not vanish, it becomes integrated, and love ceases to be a possession, it becomes a path. For both man and woman, this understanding changes everything. Because once you see that fear and love are two names for the same gate, you stop running from the intensity, you begin to listen. You see that his withdrawal may not mean he stopped caring. It may mean he cared too much. That the silence after passion is not indifference, but confusion in the face of awakening. And that perhaps beneath every retreat, there is an unspoken prayer. Please don't see me as less just because I am scared. If you can hold that truth without rescuing, without chasing, simply witnessing, you give love its highest form, freedom. Fear convinces him to hide. Love invites him to stay, and every man must decide which one he will serve. Identity and presence, what intimacy reflects back. When the silence settles after passion, a man is left alone with himself, and in that quiet, the question returns, who am I when the noise fades? For centuries, masculinity was measured by conquest, to build, to dominate, to seed, to prove. A man's worth lived outside of him, in what he could achieve, what he could control, what he could take. But now, in this new age of consciousness, something ancient is shifting. Men are awakening to a deeper truth, that their identity is not built through domination, but through presence. Presence, the art of being fully here, without armor, without agenda. It sounds simple, but it is the most difficult act of all, because presence requires stillness, and stillness exposes everything we run from. In intimacy, presence becomes mirror. It reflects who he believes he is, and who he truly is beneath the masks. He may enter with confidence, the persona of, I know what I'm doing, the image of control. But when the act is over, and she looks at him, not at his body, but into his eyes, something inside him trembles. Did she see the man he wanted her to see, or the man he actually is? That reflection can either heal or wound. A single glance of acceptance can affirm his entire being. A moment of coldness can send him spiraling back into shadow. Because intimacy, at its core, is not neutral. It either integrates or it fractures. When she responds with warmth, she becomes the nurturing anima, the inner feminine that holds and heals. Her gaze tells him, "You are safe, you can rest now." And the boy inside him exhales. But when she turns away too soon, when her silence feels like judgment, he feels the echo of every rejection he has ever known. His shadow awakens, the voice that whispers, "You failed." This is not about guilt, it is about awareness. Because once he sees the pattern, he no longer has to be ruled by it. Jung called this the meeting of archetypes, the place where the inner masculine and the inner feminine exchange their eternal vows. Each encounter becomes a ceremony, not of lust, but of becoming. If he bases his identity only on her reaction, he will become dependent, forever chasing validation through others. If he denies her impact completely, he will become numb, using intimacy as an escape instead of an awakening. But there is a third path, the path of consciousness. Here, he sees her presence as reflection, not definition. Her warmth reminds him of his own capacity to love. Her silence teaches him to face his own insecurity. Her gaze becomes the mirror through which he learns who he truly is, and through that mirror, his identity evolves, not as image, but as being. This is the hidden gift of intimacy. It strips away illusions, not to humiliate, but to reveal. Because in the moment he feels most exposed, he is also closest to truth, presence. That sacred stillness between two souls becomes the bridge between who he was and who he is becoming. When he stops seeking validation and begins to listen to what intimacy reflects, he discovers that his worth was never in her response, but in his own awareness. And in that awareness, love is no longer something to win or lose. It becomes a state of being. For the woman, this realization brings grace, because she no longer needs to carry his self-image, nor interpret his silence as rejection. She can simply be, knowing that her presence matters, that even the smallest act of tenderness can echo in the chambers of his psyche long after touch has ended. When she holds space with warmth and clarity, she helps him integrate his shadow, without words, without effort, just by being real. Intimacy, then, is not finished when the bodies separate. It lingers, in memory, in breath, in the slow reshaping of identity. Each encounter either reinforces the mask or removes it. Each moment of presence either builds illusion or births awakening. And Jung would say, this is the sacred task of love, to make the unconscious conscious. When a man allows the reflection of intimacy to shape him, to show him both his pride and his doubt, his strength and his fear, he is walking the path of individuation. He no longer needs to prove himself. He no longer hides from tenderness. He simply is. And in that state of being, he becomes capable of the purest love, a love that does not cling, does not possess, but simply witnesses. Presence is the final gift of intimacy. When the mask falls and the soul stands unguarded, that is where love begins to see itself. So when he stays after, when he lingers in silence, touching her hair, resting his hand on her chest, feeling her heartbeat against his, it is not just affection. It is remembrance, a quiet gratitude for the mirror that helped him see. And if he leaves, if he grows silent, if he withdraws, it does not mean love never happened. It means the reflection was too bright. He saw too much of himself, and he's still learning how to hold it. Either way, intimacy has done its work. The mirror has shown the truth. Now it is up to the soul to integrate what it saw. When all the words are gone, when the bodies fall silent, what remains is the quiet echo of truth. For the man, intimacy was never just an act, it was initiation. A passage through the hidden corridors of the soul, where shadow and light finally meet. He thought he was entering her, but he was entering himself. Every fear, every ache, every tremor was his unconscious rising to the surface, asking to be seen, asking to be healed. For the woman, intimacy was never just surrender, it was mirror. The sacred space where she witnessed the birth of his vulnerability and the reflection of her own. Together, they became the two halves of a single moment of awakening. The act ends, but the meaning stays. It lingers in the psyche, in memory, in the way he walks differently, quieter, more aware, as if something ancient inside him has remembered. This This is what Jung meant by making the unconscious conscious. It does not happen in books nor in theories, but in the trembling reality of being seen and not running away. When a man learns to face what rises within him, the pride, the fear, the hunger for worth, and allows it all to coexist without shame, he becomes something rarer, a conscious lover, a man who no longer performs love, but embodies it. He no longer enters to conquer, he enters to connect. He no longer seeks proof of his worth, he becomes the presence that proves it. And for the woman who meets him there, fully aware, fully grounded in her own light, she becomes not his salvation, but his reflection of truth. Through her stillness, he remembers his own. This is the hidden revolution of consciousness, to turn intimacy into temple, to let every encounter become a step toward wholeness. Because love, when seen through the eyes of awareness, is no longer just emotion, it is mirror. It shows us who we are and who we are afraid to be. So when you find yourself in that quiet moment after, when breath softens and the world feels both near and infinite, remember this: you are standing in the sacred field where two souls have met, and both are forever changed. It is not the body that transforms us, it is the seeing, it is the presence. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Carl Jung. This is what it means to awaken through love. So if these reflections stirred something in you, if they made you see intimacy in a way you never have before, take a moment to breathe, to notice what moved within you. Because the work of awakening does not begin with theories, it begins with awareness, with seeing your own shadow, in the mirror of love and in the silence that follows it. If you wish to journey deeper into these truths, into the psychology of the soul, the archetypes of love, and the hidden patterns that shape your heart, you are invited to stay, like this video, share it with someone who needs to understand the unseen depth of what love really is, and subscribe, so you can walk with us through more Jungian reflections, more heart-to-heart awakenings. Because this channel, Inner Balance Psychology, is not about answers, it is about mirrors. Mirrors that help you remember what your soul already knows. Intimacy is not what two bodies share, it is how two souls awaken each other to truth. And now, as you leave this space, take that truth with you. Let it move through you like quiet light under the skin, because every time you love consciously, you bring one more fragment of the unconscious into the light of awareness. And that, Carl Jung would say, is the real work of the soul.